Okay, this part of the lecture, we are really going to focus on motivational interviewing. So one of the things that the motivational interviewing kind of theory states is that there's this spirit of MI. And really, if you're coaching with a spirit of MI, you're going to think of four main things that you need to include: collaboration, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. So collaboration essentially says that MI is client-centered. And what we think is that the client is the ultimate expert of their own life. So really there's this active relationship between the client and the coach. MI conversations should look smooth and controlled, and they should be kind of like a dance, right? Where if someone is leading the dance, you want to make sure that they're not tripping or stepping on toes. But important to have this really pretty, beautiful dance, you need to have a partnership. So without this partnership, there is no dance. And so that's really what this idea of collaboration is that you and your client are dancing together and we're trying to make this kind of really smooth, beautiful dance, right? Then the second piece of the spirit of MI is acceptance. And that's this unwavering acceptance of our client. Our partnership is and should be with our clients rooted in respect. It should be rooted in trust, empathy, and genuine non-judgmental care. If you think about many of your clients that you will work with, they have tried and tried and tried again to achieve their goals, and oftentimes they're not successful, not for lack of them trying, but because they haven't had someone by their side that has been there in a non-judgmental way. And so as a wellness coach and health coach, that's our job. Third, compassion. So we want to have unwavering commitment to our clients' needs, right? And making sure that we're prioritizing those. This is what is going to lead to building and maintaining a good rapport with your client. And then evocation. In the role of the coach to evoke evocation, to evoke recognition from the client as to what they need to change. And here you're going to call upon your client and understanding that your client has this inner wisdom, right? They know what they've done well in the past. They don't know what doesn't work well in the past. They know what barriers exist. They know what motivates them. And so really you are calling upon your client's inner wisdom rather than saying, hey, this is what you're doing wrong and this is what you should be doing to correct your wrongs. So again, we're evoking that knowledge and that information from our client. So there are core skills of motivational interviewing, and we're going to touch on those in a second. But really what I want you to remember is that the goal of MI is to guide an individual's process of self-discovery. Okay, so we're guiding their self-discovery, and we want to help our clients build autonomous motivation so that they can have that long-term behavior change. So we want to apply the four core skills of MI when approaching interviewing with our clients. And these four core skills should be used when we're interviewing our clients on pretty much a daily basis, right? Every time we're working with them, utilizing MI, we're thinking about these four core skills. And they can be very easily remembered by noting this acronym, OARS, O-A-R-S. So we're going to start with the O in that acronym. The O stands for open-ended questions. It's important for us to be able to invite our clients to share more information about ourselves. When we ask closed-ended questions, those are yes or no, right or wrong, right? Those are not going to give you a lot of information. So as a coach, you want to explore more information from them by using these open-ended questions. And by doing so, your client likely will paint a broader picture for the health coach, right? For you as a health coach. And it's going to allow information that is important to the client to surface. I can't tell you how many times I'd asked an open-ended question and my client answers and then goes on this whole other tangent that really kind of provides me with this great information that I would never have thought to ask about, but is associated with their long-term goal and behavior change. So oftentimes these questions will start with what or how, and we'll practice some of these in our lab as well. The A in OARS stands for affirmations, and these are statements that reinforce our client's strengths, and we're really thinking about staying positive in this process and avoiding this deficit mentality to a strength mentality. So rather than saying this is what you're doing wrong or this is what you haven't been doing in the past, we're really focusing in on our client's strengths. We've explored this and remembered those strengths maybe from previous conversations, and then utilizing those strengths to provide affirmations throughout our conversation with our client. And really the purpose of affirmations is so that we can build autonomous motivation, okay? Now the R in OR stands for reflective listening. You might remember from previous lectures we talked about active listening. It's essentially the same thing. And what we do is we combine verbal and nonverbal responses to indicate interest and understanding and really encourage our client to keep talking. It's going to help our client feel understood and valued. And sometimes it involves us kind of taking a best guess, right, at what we think the client is saying. And what's great about that is if we do that, it gives our clients an opportunity to say, you know what, that's right, this is exactly how I feel. Or, you know what, I think that's maybe not how I feel, and this is exactly how I feel. So it gives them an opportunity to see if we're understanding them, and really maybe for them to better understand themselves and how they're articulating it. There are multiple different types of reflective listening. Now you'll notice that these ones with the asterisks are ones that we've actually covered over, right? So I'll briefly go over those. We've already talked about them in previous lectures. The ones that don't have asterisks are relatively new to you. So simple reflections, again, are basically those really rudimentary, simple statements about what your client has said. So an example of this would be, if I'm the coach, you know what, it sounds like you're angry at your friend for canceling last minute on meeting you at the gym. It's just an easy reflection of what they said. Now, a more complex reflection is a guess at the underlying meaning of what the client has said. So in the same scenario, I might say, it sounds like you're frustrated because you were counting on your friend to help motivate you through that workout. Okay, so you can see how that's more complex. It's not me just simply stating what they said, but it's adding a little bit of interpretation. A straight reflex is a simple or complex reflection in response to a client's sustained talk. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, sustained talk is essentially statements reflecting a desire to maintain their status quo. So this will happen to you when you're working with clients. They will say things that kind of almost justify continuing the behavior that they're there working with you for, right? So an example of this is if a client says, and this is probably something you've heard before, you know, I don't really overeat and I don't think changing how I eat will influence my weight. I've tried it before, trust me. Okay, does that sound familiar? So as a coach, you might respond to this with, no matter how little you eat, you cannot lose weight. So you feel that it's not worth making any dietary changes. What's great about this straight reflection is that you hear your client using sustained talk, right? They want to stay in that behavior. You're restating it kind of very straight into the point, okay? And sometimes that can sound a little rude, right? If you hear what I said, no matter how little you eat, you cannot lose weight, so you feel that it's not worth making changes. That might seem to you like, oh, that's a little aggressive comment, okay? But when you do that, when they're using sustained talk, often what will happen is that after you restate it as a coach, they might follow that with a statement that is change talk. And change talk are statements that reflect a desire to change. So sometimes by them just hearing you say it in this straightforward way, it helps trigger their brain of saying, you know what, maybe I don't want that. And then they start engaging in change talk. Amplified reflections, again, we've gone over these before. These are just kind of overstated reflections that really challenge the client to think a little bit differently. So an example is if your client says, you know, there's no reason to quit smoking, it makes me feel good. You as the coach might say, smoking feels healthy for you. So at no point did they say it makes them feel healthy, but you're kind of amplifying what they're saying, again, to kind of hopefully trigger maybe some of that change talk. And then this double-sided reflection is really what I personally try to do the most. I think these are the most probably successful in helping my clients kind of start facilitating this change talk conversation. So a double-sided reflection is when you integrate a client's sustained talk with the client's own previously stated change talk. So let's pause here because it's a lot of words. Essentially what you're doing is you're remembering a time when your client said something that, all right, here's a behavior they don't want to change. And then you're using a time when your client said they do want to change that behavior, and you're putting those two statements together, joined by an and, right? And you always want that sustained talk stated first. Okay? So an example of this would be, it sounds like you don't have time to exercise, right? But when you exercise, you're more productive at work. Or it could be said, you don't have time to exercise, and when you exercise, you are more productive at work. When you put these two reflections together, that double-sided reflection, and you have this kind of sustained talk immediately followed by change talk, oftentimes that's where that ambivalence is like, whoa, I see it. And the client can kind of see it in that moment. But that is going to take you as a coach taking mental memory and notes of things that they have said in the past so you can kind of paint this big picture. So reflective listening is something that really encourages three other things. Includes three other things. You have to be encouraging. So oftentimes with our clients, it's really important for us to use our body language as well as short little phrases to let them know that we're still listening and that we're genuinely interested. So this could be things like, oh, interesting. Oh, I see. Sure, that makes sense. Little things that happen naturally in those pauses of your client's speech can again be very, very encouraging. Paraphrasing, right? So you're, as a coach, can often demonstrate an understanding by simply restating in a clear and concise way what your client has said. And oftentimes in this reflective listening, the examples that we just went over, many of that is kind of paraphrasing. And then reflecting emotional content. The health coach should find opportunities to confirm the emotional content of the client's story, and if it's appropriate, obviously, and important. So an example of this is, if your client you're watching them and you're listening to them and they seem a little upset or discouraged, you might simply say, you seem discouraged, or on the opposite end, that sounds like a lot of fun, right? So really listening and paying attention to their emotions and reflecting that back to them. And the last part of OARS is S, which stands for summarizing. And this provides an opportunity to emphasize the most useful parts of a conversation. And at certain points in the conversation, the coach can actually recap these key points that the client has shared, and that really kind of provides the client with a big picture idea of what's happening. It demonstrates effective listening, and it can help sometimes get people back on track if they've already transitioned to a new topic. Then another big important thing here, and I think many people are kind of thinking this is, well, will I ever be able to provide my client with any advice or information? And the answer is yes. So a big piece of MI is just listening to your client and asking questions and guiding the conversation. But there is going to be a time where you will provide some content, some information for them. But the most important thing to know is that it's when your client requests that information. Or if it's something that you think is really, really important for their health, the other alternative is to say, I have a suggestion or I have a thought about that. Do you mind if I can share that? Again, asking for their permission gives them autonomy, which we know is really important. So what we try to do to provide information, we use this elicit, provide, elicit approach. So elicit means you're going to use these open-ended questions so that you can better understand what your client already knows about that topic. An example of this is you could say, well, tell me a little bit more about why you want to start being physically active. And they might say, well, I've heard being physically active lose weight. I know that if I can walk more, I might lose some weight. I also might build some bone mass. Osteopenia runs in my family. So then you're triggered as the, exercise scientist. You are triggered to think, oh, they have osteopenia in their family. You probably already know that, right, from their health history. And now you want to provide them some information potentially about resistance training, right? Because we know the benefits of resistance training and building bone. Your client hasn't specifically asked about this, okay? But they did ask about ways that they can be healthier and engage in physical activity. So you start with this elicit, open-ended question. What do you know about physical activity? And why are you doing it? Then the coach can reflect back on that statement that they give and then also give some information that's of relevance. So you can say, well, so it sounds like you really want to start being physically active because you have an interest in losing weight and you know that you have some health issues in your family like osteopenia that you think physical activity can help with. Did you also know that resistance training is one of the best ways to build bone? So in addition to walking, like you mentioned, you probably maybe want to consider also having some sort of resistance training in your daily routine or weekly routine. And then elicit, the coach checks back with the client to assess understanding and respond to that information. At that point, you can say, so does anything I say have questions with it, or do you have any questions? Does it make sense? Right, those kind of things. Oftentimes, without even saying that statement, clients will kind of go in and say, oh yeah, or can you tell me more about this? Okay, it's a kind of a natural piece of the conversation. So we're almost done with this. The 4 processes of MI, right? We want to engage them. Okay, and this may occur over time or all in one session, by the way. Okay, so this kind of natural flow of MI. The 4 processes include engaging, so we want to make sure we build rapport and trust. Okay, focusing, we want to set an agenda to provide useful direction. Evoking, we need to discover and kind of discuss what's really motivating the client. And then lastly, planning. We want to utilize the preparation stage from the trans-theoretical model that we had previously kind of learned about. Okay, so engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. Those are 4 processes of MI that, again, can happen in one session with your client, but typically take a few sessions and occur over a period of time. So let's go ahead and stop here, and let's go ahead and do a learning recap. First thing is, what is the goal of motivational interviewing? Second question, what does the acronym OARS stand for? Third, what does elicit, provide, elicit refer to? And then fourth, what are the 4 processes of MI? We'll pause here and I'll see you for the next lecture.